everybody. It is Cats and Bolts, broadcasting from Podcast Junkie Studio in beautiful downtown Boca Raton, Florida. It is Florida's favorite NHL show, Florida's favorite hockey show, brought to you by DraftKings, Beach House Pompano, and Baresco. And I'm your host, Rod Peterson. She is the co-host, the lovely and talented Sarina Taylor. Hi.
Hello.
Are you ready to go and tantalize the viewers and listeners this week?
I'm always ready, but I feel like they want to hear it.
Yeah, we are. I've got 10 burning questions, everybody, but there's one that's on everybody's mind, and it's going to be like an Easter egg hunt. It's somewhere in the 10. It's not how we're starting this off, but like I say, what are you laughing at? It's an NHL show with a Florida twist. That's what we do, but let's go with my number one point. And it's just me and her. No guests this week. We will talk about future guests a little later on in the show. But number one, Sarina Dawn, all of a sudden, Spittin' Chicklets has said that the Florida Panthers are Stanley Cup contenders. And because Ryan Whitney said it, everybody's going nuts. It's a little bit of how the tail wags the dog in society now. The media is driving this. I could have told you the Florida Panthers were a Stanley Cup contender going into this season. But do you agree or disagree with Ryan Whitney on that?
Didn't we have the conversation last week that if you make the playoffs, you're a Stanley Cup contender?
Yes, a little bit.
I mean, are they contenders? Maybe. I don't know. There's a lot of good teams in the NHL right now. And I'd just be curious as to why he all of a sudden brought up that he thinks that Florida is a Stanley Cup contender. Mm-hmm. They've won one game out of their last 5. They lost 4 in a row, and they were atrocious in some of those games. We watch it. It was not typical Panther play. There was definitely a lot missing. So I was just curious, like, why he would say that. It wouldn't surprise me if there's probably 8 teams that are going to make the playoffs that it wouldn't surprise me if they won the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, well, it is not surprising to me that we're not going to see eye to eye on this. But I think my thing is Ryan Whitney is just looking at the standings more than anything. And as we sit here today, the Panthers are second place in the Atlantic Division. They're plus 25 goal differential, and they're a very good team. I think we can all agree that they're going to be in the playoffs. And I'm with you. It's not new, this saying just make the playoffs, just get in and you have a chance. But I think he's saying that he could see them winning the Stanley Cup, as could I. But you make a really good point. We sit here every week and we talk about these teams, primarily the Panthers and the Lightning. That's why we call it the Cats and Bolts. And
jeez, apparently
my banner just fell down.
Yeah.
Matthew Tkachuk just fell down. Can you show me, Matthew? And that reminds me.
Literally said,
I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm out of here. Actually, we've got the third bobblehead in the set. That's about my 9th or 10th point. Thank you so much to the Florida Panthers. I've got all 3, Matthew Tkachuk, Aaron Ekblad, and Alexander Barkov. And later on, we'll be talking about who should be the next bobblehead for the Florida Panthers. But I find it very hard. You can't watch all the games. This is the one thing that I wanted to point out. I watch pretty much every Panthers game and as many Lightning games as I can. You would watch all the Oilers games if you could. You watch them in the Eastern time zone. They're just on too late out here. I think Ryan Whitney's sitting in wherever he sits. And by the way, I'm a Spittin' Chicklets fan, more so a Biz fan than Whitney. But there's no way they're watching the Panthers games. Maybe they caught a glimpse of a game and they think they're good or something.
Yeah.
Like, unless you're a general manager in the league, you're not watching every game.
I don't think a lot of people outside this area are making a point of watching the Panther games unless their team is playing them.
Or they have a kid playing for the
Right,
Panthers.
it's the way it's always been. It's got nothing to do with the Panthers or whatever. It's just not a continental-wide it's a popularity contest these days. Mm-hmm. And you don't have a ton of Panthers fans like we've had the discussion before. Just you're not seeking out, even we were talking about when we were growing up with Ed Jovanovski and guys like that, watching them, we never really watched them that much because who the hell watched the Panthers? We have enough going on, right? Like when
Plus they weren't on TV.
Right,
but
exactly. And that's like
7 Canadian teams.
Right. Like someone like my dad, he doesn't have access to all the games, so he's not watching the Panthers. He does if he can, but he's got a million other things to go.
To boil it down, she's saying if they make the playoffs, they'll be a Stanley Cup contender.
Everybody else is.
Right, exactly. Now, on to point 2. Are the Tampa Bay Lightning going to be a playoff team? Because as we sit here right now, going into the season, I had Toronto 1, Florida 2, Tampa 3, Buffalo 4. And I'm right only on Florida being number 2. Boston, I shouldn't say they came out of nowhere, but they're the number 1 team in the NHL. But the Lightning aren't in the playoffs as we sit here today. Are they going to be?
I think so. You never want to count them out. They're just too strong to roll over and play dead right now. They're just way too strong. They got the league's leading scorer on their team, and they have so many other guys that are strong and that are contributing on a daily basis. So, yeah, I think they're going to be fine.
We have way, way, way more Lightning talk coming up and near the end of our 10 burning questions. But do you feel like people are just waiting for the Lightning to fall? I don't feel like they've been so successful that people hate them. It's just they're thinking they can't be at the top or near the top every year. It's almost like people want it.
People want it, I think, to validate themselves. Like, see, I told you they weren't going to win. They can't win this many in a row or whatever it happens to be. But they haven't really made any big trades. And their team, yeah, they've lost a lot of guys like Palat and Bogosian and guys like that, but they're still a great hockey team. They're so balanced. They always have been. They're poised. They play professionally. They don't make mistakes. The other night when Minnesota was here and we went to the Panthers game, I saw the Panthers make mistakes that reminded me of when Vegas was here in the Stanley Cup final. I went, this is why the Panthers didn't win the Stanley Cup. They made too many mistakes. They weren't as good of a team. And Tampa is a strong team. You know, you don't see glimpses of them not being able to clear the puck out of their own zone or turning around and passing it in the offensive zone. And it goes back up the ice. We saw that so many times. I'm like, you can't do that.
They're a very strong veteran team. And one day they'll be an old team. I'm not sure they're there yet.
No,
they're not there yet. But if, and that's why they're slowly making changes. But, I don't criticize the NHL much because I love it so much. It's my favorite league. But one thing that bothers me is the Panthers and Lightning have only met once. There's a scheduling problem in the National Hockey League. That's a fact.
I think, didn't we say Montreal and Ottawa played last night for like the 5th time in 2 weeks or something crazy like that? It was at least 4 times. And yeah, I don't really understand the thought process behind that or what's going on there. And I remember when they cut out, they said, yeah, we're not going to have 12 or 16 or whatever Battle of Albertas like we used to have. And people in Alberta were like, wait, time out. You're cutting this out? Because remember back when we had the Smythe division where you played your division's team more than you played the other divisions.
Yeah.
It was broken down a little bit differently that way.
Yeah. Is this the conspiracy theorist in me that they have cut back on the rivalry games shortly after the brawl for it all, the 6-on-6 on Hockey Night in Canada, Calgary, Edmonton? They're like, we can't have these rival teams meeting as much because they're brawling too much. It seemed to change then.
I don't know. I mean, maybe, but why would you change that? I mean,
we can't have fights.
Gary Bettman at its finest. But look at that game the other night between Minnesota when they were here. There were fight after fight after fight. This was one of the best amount of fights I've seen in a game in a long time. And the game itself wasn't that great, but there were a lot of fights and you knew it was going to be a rough game the whole time. And I was sitting on my edge of my seat waiting to see what was going to happen next.
You know what I noticed, Sarina, when they were fighting? Nobody was getting up to go to the bathroom.
Yeah. A lot of people left that game early, though.
Well, because the Panthers were losing, and we'll move on to the next point in a moment. But was it that game? One of the games in the 4-game losing streak, Paul Maurice was visibly upset afterwards.
It was the game before.
Was it? Okay.
It was the game before that. But we were talking about in the Minnesota game, he's got to be losing his mind right now. And Bobrovsky ended up getting pulled. None of the goals were his fault. There's only so much you can do. But I forget who they were playing. Are you looking it up?
I know which.
It was right before. It was the team right before that.
It was the overtime. It was the Detroit game. That was the game that the Panthers lost in overtime. Yeah. And Paul Maurice said that 3-on-3 or 4-on-3 isn't hockey. And Jameson Olive of the Panthers asked him a question. He's like, I refuse to answer that. It was nothing at Jameson. He's like, if I say something, I'm going to get fined here.
Which
about
is
the officiating.
Very unlike Paul Maurice because he usually doesn't go off like that. But I'll say it like this. The officiating in the NHL over the last couple years has been the worst it's ever been. And last year, the Panthers got away with a lot in the playoffs that the other teams were not getting away with. And now the chickens are coming to roost. And that's why he's upset. There's been a lot of calls that have been missed for everybody. Everyone's getting the heat right now. So get upset if you want. You had 60 minutes before overtime to win the game and you didn't. So blame the refs all you want. You didn't win the game. You didn't play well enough to win.
Ding, 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 ding. Just before I came into Podcast Junkie Studios with Sarina, I asked the people on Twitter, where you can follow us at Cats and Bolts, if you had any questions. Frank Salazar writing us on Twitter and says, question, do you guys think that the Lightning are just playing poker face with us and waiting until the playoffs to do damage?
No, absolutely not. John Cooper would never allow that. He's not going to tell his team to sit back or even have that attitude. It's just not his style.
Speaking of a guy named Frank Salazar, I'm going to send, and thank you for the question, by the way, Frank. I'm sending Ben, our producer, our lovely and talented producer, a photo that if you can pull it up, Ben, I'll have you show it on the air, because my good friend Cesar, the other night at the Panthers game, got him a Kachuk bobblehead, and we posed for a photo together, and it was fantastic. Do you want me to text it to you or airdrop it, or what's best, Benny? Just yell at me.
Airdrop. Just airdrop it for me.
How about that? What does your phone come up as, Ben?
Just Ben's phone.
How did you come up with Ben's phone as the name for your phone?
Well, the story behind it was...
I got it. Okay, here we
Perfect.
go. Hey, answering questions on the fly. You would almost think this isn't a podcast, that it's a live show, but it's not. Ding, 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 ding. This is the point they wanted. This is for you, Jeff, the hotelier. This morning, he said, can you put Sarina's face on? Because I'm getting a kick out of it. More than I normally do. Jeff was like, I can't wait to hear Sarina's take on Corey Perry signing with the Edmonton Oilers, because you went on my Rod Peterson show, the television show, and said you'd rather clip your nails with a rusty nail than sign Corey Perry. And then they did. So how do you feel about Corey Perry signing with the Edmonton Oilers?
Well, I think a lot of people just assumed that I was anti-Corey Perry because of all the shenanigans he's been. Dude, I don't care. I don't care what you did. I don't care whatever. I just have not been a Corey Perry fan for a long time. It goes way back, a lot longer than anything recent. So no, I'm not a Corey Perry fan. I personally haven't been able to stand him. He's dirty, he's cheap, and my biggest concern, he's going to take a stupid penalty at the wrong time. That is absolutely going to happen. I understand that he has done a lot of productive things in the playoffs. I've seen it. He's productive. When he signed in Chicago, I was like, this is the right player that they should be signing with Connor Bedard. Not on my team, though. Everybody's like, oh, he's the kind of guy that if he was on your team, you'd love him. No, absolutely not.
I wrote his numbers down. And let me say this again. Sarina doesn't hate Corey Perry because of the Chicago incident and the rumors, which we'll get into in a minute. It's from his Anaheim days. And was there something specific? Or was it a cumulative effect of what he did there?
I watched him just get away with so much crap. And kind of going back to talking about the officiating being terrible. We saw at the Panthers game a couple of weeks ago, Ekblad, I think it was Ekblad, got a hooking penalty and he didn't even touch the guy. It makes no sense to me. Yet in front of the net, guys are cross-checking other guys, banging them around, hacking them, and no penalties are being called. And that's ridiculous to me. And that's the kind of guy Corey Perry has been. For probably the first 4 or 5 years when he came out of junior, he wasn't that bad. But now coming in here, he's banging and he takes stupid penalties because he does stupid things. But when he was in Anaheim, they got away with murder. And I watched it when Edmonton was playing them in the playoffs, and it was game after game after game. It wasn't just me. Everybody was like, this is the worst reffing I've ever seen. And a lot of it was Corey Perry not getting called for penalties that he should have been called on. And from that moment on, I just don't like his style of play. He's a has-been. I really just don't feel like this is... No, he's not going to come along and prove me wrong. Let me put it that way.
I would say she's sufficiently explained herself, but I will say this. Number one, I'm friends with a lot of NHL referees, some NFL, but more hockey, and the officiating is going to get worse, just so you know. It's one of the things I hate talking about the most. You don't ever see me bring it up because I don't have My expectations are very, very low. But that's a topic for another day. But can I just say this about Corey Perry? 1,273 NHL games played, 892 points, 1,392 penalty minutes with Anaheim, Dallas, Montreal, Tampa Bay, Chicago. He's won a Stanley Cup with Anaheim, getting ahead of myself, and been to the NHL's finals with Dallas, Montreal, and Tampa Bay. Any chance you win with a guy like that?
He's clearly jinxed. Cool. He's been to the finals 3 times and lost in a row.
Won the Stanley Cup in 07. Did you hear that?
First of all, I knew that. I didn't have to hear
You're
it.
conveniently
But
skimming
thank you
over it.
for-
But
Well, I'm listening to the recent Corey Perry, not the first
Okay.
4 years that he played.
Gotcha.
Okay, just double checking.
So you don't... you continue.
You asked a question. Well,
So you're saying you could have at one time won with Corey Perry, but you can't now.
well, he's definitely a different player than he used to be. 15 years ago, he was a completely different player. He was an effective player on that 2007 Stanley Cup winning team. Everybody's like, oh, he's effective, he's this, he's that. It's like, when Chicago picked him up, it made sense to me. When Edmonton's picking him up, it doesn't make sense to me.
Gotcha. I'm just writing Frank Salazar back. Done. Hey, regarding that Atlantic division, the Toronto Maple Leafs are in the final playoff spot. Wild card as we sit here today. The Lightning are not. Do you expect Toronto to have the same coach till the end of the year?
They shouldn't. I think the biggest problem in Toronto is, what are we missing? We have an incredible bunch of players, and their head coach is not performing. Those guys should have been way more successful over the past 3 or 4 years than they have been. And it's getting worse. They're getting further and further and further away from winning the Stanley Cup like everybody wants them to up there.
Okay, we're on the 5th point, getting sidetracked somewhat, which is what I want. But I want to remind you that we're brought to you by DraftKings, the official sports betting partner of the NFL. The crown is yours. If you are betting at DraftKings, use the promo code you see on the screen, THPN, that stands for the Hockey Podcast Network. The NHL's premier podcasts are part of the Hockey Podcast Network, including ours. Although a new one has sprouted up here in South Florida, which I'll get to in a moment. We're also brought to you by Beach House Pompano, a scenic rooftop restaurant on the shores of Pompano Beach, and Baresco, a tropical outpost serving only the freshest tacos and lush jungle vibes, located at 225 North Pompano Beach Boulevard. Our guests receive gift cards from Beach House Pompano and Baresco. There's a new podcast called Cats and Rats.
Did you hear that, Ben?
Does that sound familiar? Does the name ring a bell?
Spelled very similar.
Wait,
Cats
really?
In rats.
Yeah, it's a fact. I don't know whether to be upset, flattered, or shocked. Cats and Rats.
What are they talking about?
They talk
Cats
about the
and
Florida
rats.
Panthers, believe it or not.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. That's bad. We got to get a camera on you. Can we do that?
I can put a camera. Yeah.
Just get a shot of this suave, young Cuban. I was thinking of where you're sitting. Oh, that's what you're doing. Okay.
Oh, he's turning the whole camera around to see him. He's
Why the
just-
hell not?
He can do it.
We
owns
do
the
whatever
place.
we want here. You know, speaking of that, well, I would never say this on my television show, but I'll say it here. And you let me know when you're ready, Ben. Corey Perry allegedly had his contract terminated by the Blackhawks for, can you say, hitting on an NBC Chicago on-air personality. Rumored to be Chris Chelios' daughter, Kaylee Chelios.
Yeah, I mean, those are the kinds of things that happen when people. Alcohol is not for everyone, but I applaud the Blackhawks for not screwing around with that. And I don't really think that they're in a position to be messing around with stuff like that. They have there's too much water under that bridge,
Yeah, like I say, that's not something I would get to on national television, but on a podcast, why the hell not? And that's rumored to be what it is if you haven't heard yet. You got yourself, Ben?
Yep.
This is Ben Castro, everybody, the producer of the award-winning Cats and Bolts podcast. Not to be confused with Cats and Rats.
The award-winning.
Can you see yourself? Are you there? There he is.
Yes.
Look at that.
Beamed in from NASA. Ben Castro. Thank you for all you do, my friend. This bud's for you. Okay. We may bring him back, maybe not. Be prepared. Point 5 is the All-Stars. We knew Sergei Bobrovsky. Trying to remember, was he? Yeah, he was voted in by the fans. Sam Reinhart was the Panthers rep, having a hell of a season. Kucherov from the Lightning. So there are 3 coming from the 2 teams that we follow. Will you be watching the NHL All-Star Game?
No, I honestly don't even know when it is.
Neither do I actually.
Literally could care less. I feel like I probably haven't watched an All-Star game, and if I say 20 years, that's minimum 20 years.
Oh, save for last year. We watched some of it.
No, we watched you might have watched it, but we went to the skills competition the night before, and it was horrendous to the point where we left early. More people in the stands were trying to get pictures with the mascots than anything else. It was...
Okay, I apologize. It's next weekend. I didn't even know the dates, but part of that is because my mind's on Super Bowl. I'm fortunate enough to go to Las Vegas the week after. But all these skills competitions, the game itself, the draft, it's February 3rd, 4th weekend. So I guess I'm not surprised, but I had to ask. You won't be watching.
No.
Okay, fair. This is something Sarina wanted to talk about. We do have input of the co-host. Halfway surprises. We have just passed the midway point. The Panthers Wild game here was the official halfway mark of the season in the National Hockey League. For the whole league, 42 games passed. What are your surprises? You wanted to talk about individual surprises and team surprises, if I'm not mistaken.
I would have to say, as far as team surprises, Vancouver Canucks. I'm blown away. Do I think they're a Stanley Cup contender? No. Just because they're in first place, I really don't feel like they are. I just don't quite think they have the experience that way. But as far as players, I would say Kucherov. Kucherov is the most surprising. I know he's got the skill and the talent, but he's got 80 points as of the recording right now. It's incredible. And secondly, Nate McKinnon is second in the league in scoring. I mean, unbelievable. Nate McKinnon is just something else.
Kucherov had 4 points in the Lightning 6-3 win at Philadelphia the other night. So he is having a hell of a season. Kind of single-handedly willing the Lightning to whatever they're going to do. If they make the playoffs, he'll be the reason.
He is this is the best season I've seen Kucherov have. And sometimes I wonder with players like Kucherov that have the talent, I wonder if you have guys like Stamkos and all those big guys, and it's not that they're not pulling their weight. They're just not the shining star of the team that they used to be. And so sometimes that's when guys like Kucherov come out of the woodwork and they really have that moment of shine.
Well, speaking of, Kucherov has the points lead. Austin Matthews of the Toronto Maple Leafs has the goals lead. And what I'm getting to is Sam Reinhart of your Florida Panthers is not a household name. He's starting to be, but he hasn't been. And I've written down here, Sarina, would you pay Sam Reinhart? He's already got 34 goals and a half a season. This is his best season he's ever had. If he shut it down right now, this is the most goals he's ever scored in a season. He's at 34. And just going back 31, 33, going back in years. And then he was in Buffalo for many years, 25, 22, 22, 25, 17, 23. Well, his contract's up. Anybody can see that it's a contract year. He's had a fire lit under his butt. Would you pay him?
Depending on what they have left in the cap to pay him, because I don't think he's making very much money right now. I honestly
Probably
don't know
not.
how much he's making. But would I blow out my cap? It's going to depend, because if they pay Reinhart, they are choosing to get rid of somebody else. They're going to have to.
And is he worth it?
It depends. It depends. Just because a guy has one good year, it doesn't make him.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And I'm almost afraid to say it out loud around here that people are going to snap.
Straight up say it. Clearly, I don't care, but it's not that. It's not that he's not having a fantastic year and he's worth, but that's what always happens. Like you just said, it's the last year of his contract. Something lit a fire under his ass, just like happens with every other player on the planet. So will he come back as strong next year? I don't know. The way the Panthers are playing, he's playing hard to the net. He's scoring a lot of goals and great, but I don't know if he can keep it up. He's consistently been about a 20-goal scorer, which there's nothing wrong with that. I'd take a 20-goal scorer like that any day of the week. Is he worth being in the top 7 paid guys on the team? Probably not.
No, he's scoring as the top guy. but he's not being paid as the top guy. So you can see where he's coming from, that he would want to get paid.
100%, absolutely.
Sure, but he's at 6.5 million.
Oh, he doesn't deserve more than that.
I don't think so.
No, that's
he's at
ludicrous.
4.5 million base salary, $2 million in bonuses, bringing his cap hit to $6.5 million.
No.
Well, will somebody else?
Oh, yeah.
Well, there you go. So say your goodbyes to Sam Reinhart.
No,
everybody.
I don't know
No?
about that.
No?
I don't know about that, but I wouldn't pay him. He's going to have to make more money. They all do when their contract expires. Mm-hmm. You always have to pay a guy more money, especially if you want to keep him.
Well, they all want it. Do they all get it? That's another story. So far, the players have been getting it, but except for Steven Stamkos. And on that, the Lightning's outlook. I'm going to combine points 8 and 9. Questions 8 and 9? What is the Lightning's outlook? Not this year, but long term. I think it's still Yzerman's team, but it's getting less and less of Yzerman's team.
Well, look at Detroit. Detroit's getting more and more of Yzerman's team now. You can see the upward swing there, and you can see the downward swing in Tampa. They're going to do what every other team that won a couple Stanley Cups does. They're going to hang on like Pittsburgh, scrape into the playoffs for however many years till their guys get old and retire. They're going to get to the point where there's not a lot of guys that they can trade at this point because they're not going to be, not that they're not going to be worth anything, but the Lightning have a lot of high salary guys. It's like, well, you're not going to trade Stamkos. Probably not going to trade Hedman. You're probably not going to trade Vasilevsky. I think those are the top three. But a guy like Hedman, he's slowing down hard. That's a big body to move. Hedman gets outskated every day of the week now. Who's going to...
Like Ekblad. I put a photo of him in the Panthers group, actually of the bobblehead, and people said I should throw it out. A person said it. I shouldn't say more than one. But they're starting to turn on their once beloved franchise face. We kind of saw that a little bit after Ekblad came back from his injury. I just don't think that he was as powerful as we thought he was going to be, and he's getting blown by. Yeah. The other night, he was on part of a goal. I think he was like +3 or something. And I'm like, how does that happen? He's a defenseman, but I think, like I said to you, I feel like if they are going to make a trade, maybe Ekblad would be somebody that would go, that they could still potentially get something for. I don't know, though. Maybe he just needs a change of pace. And with Stevie Y, I said to Sarina, why is he not in Tampa? And she said, our couch conversations. One day, you're going up to film Cuddy and Gavi, Ben. You can come to our house and film us on the couch, having our hockey discussions. He's saying, yeah, he's in. It's not as far to drive. You said his heart's not in Tampa, it's in Detroit. And my thinking was, how could it not be? Who doesn't love Florida? But he's a god in Detroit. He's probably a god in Tampa too, but not to the degree that he is in Detroit. It's where he wanted to be.
I mean, I've heard nothing positive about actually living in Detroit. I don't know. I've never been there. Gordie Howe ended up retiring and staying there.
Lots of guys are there, I guess.
Absolutely. There's a ton of guys.
McLean said that, right?
Did he?
Doug McLean said that.
Yeah,
he was just there.
There's a lot of guys that still work for the organization, and it reminds me of the Oilers. They always go back, just like Detroit. So why not? That's where he wants to be.
Yeah. For the rest of my life, I will not forget the conversation I had with Doug McLean out these doors at Podcast Junkies. Can you put the camera on us both, Ben?
Oh, boy.
Because I want her reaction. Well, I think you were standing right there. Doug McLean says, so what brought you to Florida? I went, he goes, I get it. Of her. That was it. But again, why do you go certain places? Why is your heart certain places? And Steve Yzerman's was Detroit.
I don't blame the guy for a second. I mean, Doug McLean lives here. He coached for the Panthers. He likes it here. It's warm. But he also goes back to PEI in the summers and stuff because that's where his heart is.
Yeah.
It's just the way it goes.
The reaction was less than stellar, right, Ben?
I was kind of...
We tried.
To be fair, I was kind of expecting like something crazy that he said that we didn't talk about on the air. So I was like,
you heard it? You heard him say it? You were standing right there. Yeah. Just a couple last points before we let you go on your merry way. Future guest suggestions. We've had just about everybody that people have asked for, but there are still a lot of guys left. Dennis Potvin, we won't talk about, right? They really want Randy Moeller, but he's always working.
Yeah, Randy, we've tried to get Randy a lot of times, and he's just, there's always like tonight, there's a Panthers game, and Randy's at the rink, and like it's really, really difficult for him, but that guy is a good one. He would be a good one.
He's fulfilled every request we ever had.
Yeah, he tries.
But it's normally in the off season. Man, it's go time during the season. But Ray Shepard's a guy I would like to talk to. And
That'd be
he's
interesting.
here. The more time I'm here now, I'm learning more. Paul Healy's here. I guess he runs the Ice Den. He's a good friend of mine from junior and played in the NHL a long time. But if you have guest suggestions, fire them our way, and we'll do our best that we can. Peter Worrell was like number one, and we did that, and he crushed it.
Yeah, he was great.
You want to throw that photo up, Ben? Do you have it? This is my guy, Cesar. He put out on Twitter, if anybody's going to the game tonight, Matthew Tkachuk bobblehead night, can you please get me a bobblehead? He said one person responded, that was me, and that was me and Cesar on the Patron patio. He actually says it's Caesar, but I said, Cesar sounds more regal. And he goes, you call me whatever you want. So, yeah, and you were at that game, weren't you?
He's adorable.
He's the best. We could talk about Cesar a ton. He would probably love to come on this show. But I will say this, and we probably should get him. That bobblehead night for Tkachuk, there was 10,000 bobbleheads, let's say 16, 17,000 in the barn. It was a mad scramble, almost fights on the concourse to get Tkachuk bobbleheads, whereby that wasn't for Ekblad and Barkov. There were like tons left over. The Tkachuk one caused a fury. I think it's pretty clear who's the most popular Florida Panther. And you go to enough games now and you're around, it's Tkachuk, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think with a guy like Barkov, he's been here for a while, and he's kind of a silent player.
Big time.
Yeah, and I think that's why obviously you see Barkov jerseys around the rink and stuff, but he's just not that fan favorite guy. That's not his job.
Yeah.
He's not a colorful guy. He's not
throwing parties. He's out playing defensively
Yeah,
and throwing checks and back checking. Somebody has to.
Well, he's been hurt, so
that too.
he has not been doing that.
Hey,
but
I like his shyness. To me, that's his charm. He doesn't say spit. He let everybody else do all the talking. Right? He does his hot talking on the ice. And I like that. But the next bobblehead, because they've done these three, and then there was a Barkov. Well, it's right here. This one. This is my favorite, obviously, because I love the baby blues. Love it so much. I know you're not as into bobbleheads as me, but who do you think should be the next one? Based on inclusion.
I think it would have to be Bobrovsky.
Right.
Why would you not have? They don't have enough goaltender bobbleheads out there.
No, there's hardly any. And that as part of the goalie union, I'm going to register a complaint. And as somebody wrote to me on the Panthers fan page, Bob Olhead.
Of course. That would be fantastic.
It's fantastic. Okay, thanks, Sarina Don. You killed it as always. Congratulations on being the star again.
I do what I can.
All right. Thank you, Benny. See you next week here on the Cats and Bolts podcast.